Hello, my name is Michael Godfrey. I'm a senior customer engineer here at Microsoft, and in today's video we will be looking at a quick demo on Azure Networking Essentials. So in this demo, we're going to take a look at setting up your virtual networks from the beginning. So in this demo, we're going to quickly create a new hub virtual network. So this network will be the beginning of our hub virtual networks going forward. And inside of that virtual network, I'm going to show you how I can create some subnets so that we can separate our traffic into different managed segments into the virtual network itself. After that, we will deploy a Jump virtual machine with a virtual network interface, and I'll show you how every aspect of that works. We'll be deploying this with code today through Bash, but I'll also be showing you how I would do the same task in a GUI manner through the Azure portal. So with that, let's dive into some code. So first up, all of this code is available, and I'll share it in the show notes here. But this is all available on my GitHub repo. So it's an Azure Networking Lab, and in that lab we have a hub and spoke, and we have a shell guide that I've written that will help you deploy out this exact same process from the same code, so that you can see exactly how this would work and play with it yourself. So first, we have a resource group that we've created, DemoPod RG, and so as you can see, it currently has no resources in it. We'll jump over here to the code, and we're going to first create a virtual network, and we're going to name it DemoPod Hub VNet, and we're going to give it a address space of 10.1.0.0/20. So this is the address space that we're going to deploy our virtual network in. So we'll go ahead and run that selected task. And so what this is going to do is this is going to create that virtual network very quickly. You could create this virtual network in the portal directly, but as we move towards infrastructure as code, we want to see things done in a more code-based way. So you can see the JSON output of what that virtual network came out to be, right? So we can see the virtual network IP address range, any of the resource tags and properties as far as like peerings. In our case, you can see subnets is empty because we haven't quite created those. We also didn't do tags, not a best practice, but we could do that in the future. So we'll go ahead and go back to the portal, and if we refresh, we should see that VNet. And so there's that virtual network. So here's our hub VNet itself. And you can see there's that address space that we provisioned. We have DNS servers. Here's the address space, and we can change that if we'd like to, either programmatically or in the GUI. And of course, we are going to create some subnets. So in this case, we don't have any subnets created quite yet. Again, we're going to jump back to code, but if we wanted to do that, we could do that pretty easily here in the GUI. So we'd simply give it a name, the address range that we want to use, and then we'd light up some of the features we maybe want to take advantage of. These will all be discussed later in the subsequent modules, but things like network security group, or do we want to apply a user-defined route table? Maybe we want to take advantage of service endpoints. We could do that all through the GUI. In our case, we're just going to quickly create these three subnets. And so we're going to create a subnet named Jump Server, subnet called Shared Services, and one called Gateway Subnet. So that's going to take a little second to run. So you can see we've created our first one already. Shared Services is creating right now. And as we dive in, we can see those as well. So we'll refresh. And so we have our Jump server and our shared services subnets already coming online. So quickly, I was able to create those subnets, and those subnets are isolated spaces inside of that 10.1.0.0/20 network address space. So these have to be defined in that address space itself. So you can see here, I've got a /24, and then I've got a 10.1.1/24, and so forth, right? So we also have a gateway subnet. Now this subnet does require a specific name, and so this is the subnet that when we do our virtual network gateway, when we talk about hybrid connections for establishing VPN or an express route, this is the subnet that virtual network gateway VM or VMs will be deployed into. And so this one does have to be named a certain subnet name. There are two others that require this. This is for future knowledge, but Bastion and the Azure firewall require a specific name of the subnet. So, now that we have our new subnets, we can go ahead and create a jump server. So I'm going to go ahead and create a quick jump server. And so we will see that this can be run. So we're going to quickly create a VM. And what's going to happen there is that VM is going to create a virtual network interface. So once that gets going, we'll see that we have a virtual network interface that gets deployed and connected to our jump server subnet, and that's defined here on line 35. So the process is starting to run, and we'll just give that a second. Okay, and so now our virtual machine is built and ready to go. So now if we go back to our demo pod, we should see we've got our virtual machine, the disk, the public IP address of that virtual machine, and then in our case, the network interface. And this is what we're most concerned about. So a network interface is a separate resource from a virtual machine or from a virtual network. And so you can see here we've got our virtual network interface card. And you can see it's got a public IP 2399. It's got a private IP of 10.1.0.4 because it was put into that jump server subnet. Now, let's show you how that is a separate resource. So if I go ahead and unmask this for you so you can see. So you can see here this subscription, the resource group, the provider, and then this is a different provider. So this is a .network. It's a network interface, and then the virtual machine name itself. So you can see it's a completely different provider than the virtual machine itself. The virtual machine would be a Microsoft.compute resource provider. So in this case, we have our network interface card. And in our network interface card, we can assign different IP configurations. Now, each network interface card is required to have a private IP, but it can optionally have a public IP. Now, your private IP is more than likely going to be dynamic. It's going to be assigned the first address that's available in that subnet. Now, you can change that to being a static resource if you would like to, either at deployment time or after the deployment. And so we can see here in the IP config of the network interface itself, this would also be a resource in here, right? We can see that we could choose a different public IP address, or we can even make the static assignment so that we reserve that 10.1.0.4 address if we want to. In my case, I'm fine with what we have here, so we can discard those changes, and so we can see the interface for that. So now we'll want to create, or we'll actually want to connect to that jump server. So in that code I've given you, I've also built in a process for exporting the SSH key for you, because these are Linux VMs, right? So we can export the list of IPs in the table. So you can see there's the public IP address, and then there's that private IP address for that virtual machine. We're going to go ahead and export that line 54. Create a variable in shell, and then we are just going to SSH that bad boy. first time. And now you can see that we are in that virtual machine. We can just do a simple ifconfig, and you can see the IP address 10.1.0.4. So now we're currently in that JumpVM. And so in there, we were able to create a virtual machine, connect it to our virtual network. And so if we go back to our virtual network, we can quickly see that there is our network interface. It's part of 10.1.0.4. And again, our subnets that are available. And in our Jump server subnet, we could see anything that are going to apply to the subnet. So with that, we quickly created a virtual network. We built some subnets, and we deployed a virtual machine and show you that that virtual machine is now connected and online. So with that, appreciate it, and see you in the next video.